On May 14th, 2022, 10 families lost a loved one. 10 innocent people who were at a grocery store and never made it home. Tonight, we look back on the top shooting 1 year later. Broadcasting Buffalo starts right now. Good evening, and thank you for joining us for Broadcasting Buffalo. I'm your host, Al Waters. This weekend marks 1 year since our community suffered an unthinkable and tragic loss. Grace Blackwell has more about the people who lost their loved ones at Tops on May 14th, 2022.
It's hard to put into words the magnitude of the loss felt by this community May 14th, 2022. 10 families had their loved ones taken from them just because of the color of their skin.
Simone Crawley, the granddaughter of Ruth Whitfield, spoke on behalf of her family on carrying out their grandmother's legacy in loving memory.
Our grandmother went to buy seeds for her garden on May 14th, 2022. She may not have been able to plant those seeds, but the seeds that she planted throughout her life are abundant. The same way she brought us together on Ridge Street is the same way she brought unity and solidarity to the masses. We fondly remember waking up from our sleepovers to the smell of Sunday dinner while getting ready for church. She was the driving force for our fishing trips and our camping adventures. Our grandmother had a strong and resilient spirit. She will not be present for our milestones, but we stand strong and determined and triumphant in ways that you could never fathom. We find strength in knowing that her legacy will outlive you. Our dear grandmother, Ruth Elizabeth Whitfield, she taught us the power of love. And even in our darkest hour, we will ensure that her legacy will be that of love.
Spencer Pennington, Pearl Young's nephew, speaks about Pearl's passions, which include music, children, and her church.
She loved, obviously, God. She loved the church and her family. She loved children. She just loved youth. It didn't matter if it was from church or school. She was a substitute teacher for quite some time. So one of the joys of that job for her was just to be around kids, so she was full of joy. She loved to sing and loved to laugh and dance.
Pearl was active in her church, and her spirit lives on through her memory, her missionary work, and the love she gave her community.
Saturday morning, she would have bread and canned goods and food like that available for people. Didn't have to be a member of the church, just pretty much just if you're in the area. The same guy that did this to her could have walked by the church and she would have fed him. You get what I mean? And even now with this happening, my family will feed him. My church family will feed him, and they pray for him. And every time I go home and I get to go and visit the church, they have him on their prayer list and they pray for him, and that's who we are and that's our faith. But also it's in the spirit of who she is. That's 100% what she would have wanted, is for us to try and forgive him, for us to treat him and his loved ones with all the love and compassion that we could.
72-year-old Catherine Massey is described as someone who had a powerful voice and spent her life fighting for her neighborhood. 55-year-old Aaron Salter Jr. was a security guard at the store. He was also a retired Buffalo police officer. 67-year-old Hayward Pattison was loading groceries into his trunk for a client when he was shot. Roberta Drury was 32. She was caring for her brother who was recovering from cancer. 65-year-old Celestine Cheney was described as the sweetest person ever by her granddaughter. Andre McNeil was 53 years old. He was at Tops to buy a birthday cake for his 3-year-old son. 52-year-old Margus Morrison was buying snacks for a family movie night. Geraldine Talley was a devoted mother and grandmother who was known for her warm, gentle personality. She was 62.
I knew in all of them, they were just incredible people. These were people who were pillars in the Black community.
In honor of remembering these victims, we'll have a list of ways to help their families and community on our website, broadcastingbuffalo.com. In Buffalo, I'm Grace Blackwell.
Thank you, Grace. When we return, I'll be joined by two guests whose loved ones were at Tops that day. Mark Talley lost his mother, and Zanetta Everhart's son was shot and survived. We'll be back.
This is a college that inspires. Here you'll be engaged, strive for excellence, and prepare for a career. Visit our amazing Elmwood Village campus and apply today. You'll achieve your edge here. This place is Buffalo State College.
Hello, Buffalo. I'm Ed Asner. You may remember me as television's no-nonsense news director Lou Grant. And if you think about it, journalists provide us with our first draft of history. Right here in Buffalo, more than 50 years of TV news coverage is being brought back to life. Local stations are working with the Buffalo Broadcasters Association to bring back the stories that helped define the Niagara frontier.
The Pheasant Lane neighborhood, where drifts reach to the rooftops.
It's called the Archive Project, and I support it with all my heart. So should you.
Welcome back to Broadcasting Buffalo. I'm your host, Al Waters. Tonight we're joined by Zanetta Everhart, whose son Zaire was shot at Tops and survived, and Mark Talley, whose mother Geraldine was killed that day. First, Mark, we're very sorry for your loss. What can you tell us about your mom and what we're all missing with her loss?
She was a very Southern woman. Constantly, we would make jokes with each other. I would get on her about her accent. All the food.
Tell us about the accent, though, first.
This is a very Southern Alabama, Grove Hill, Alabama slang. So it was, you could definitely hear when she would start screaming or yelling at you. So I would constantly just, like Dylan Brooks would say, I would poke the bear. We'll get the accent to come out.
So she was basically an old school mom.
Yes.
Those values she instilled in you benefited obviously by those old school values.
Oh yeah, she managed to put some of them in me. It was kind of hard for her. She was a single parent, kind of raising me, and by the time I was 11, I was pretty much the same size now. So it's kind of tough for a female trying to raise a child, especially a son. And once that son starts getting older, bigger, he kind of starts wanting to do stuff he wants to do, because he's no longer really intimidated by anybody in the house. She had lots of male siblings, but they were either drinking or smoking. So I felt I was the end all be all. So people had to come through me. I remember the last time she tried to whoop me. She took this belt and was kind of swinging at me, and I was just ducking and dodging it. It's like a game to me. Eventually she started laughing with me by the end. So she just got so tired. I got so tired, then she made a pitcher of Kool-Aid and some Winks.
So what you're saying then is, she's got the old school values, but you had a mind of your own when it came to doing things in that discipline then.
Oh yeah, I was stubborn growing up. But then she got me in Canisius, and those priests really don't do stubborn. So they will get on you.
You hung in there for the whole 4 years?
3 years. I went to Seneca Vocational, now MST, my first year, and somehow she was able to get me in Canisius from sophomore to senior.
Thanks, Mark. Zanetta, tell us how Zaire's been doing in the past year.
That's a deep question. Zaire is, he's doing well, right, physically. His wounds have healed, but, it's going to be a long road. recovery for him, not just physically, right, because he's still dealing with having shrapnel in his body from the massacre. And then there's also, you know, the mental component of it all. You know, he's still in therapy. And, you know, that's rough. That's rough. He survived the unthinkable, right? And for him, it's just been trying to figure out what his new life looks like. When this happened, you know, he was only 21, you know, and well, he was 20 right before he turned, 9 days before he turned 21 when this happened, and that's a lot for a 20-year-old to
That's a lot
grapple
for just
with.
about anybody.
For anyone, right? I don't know how I would have handled it if I was, you know, in his shoes, and so he's trying to figure out his new normal and just getting back out there, but he's doing well. He's doing well. He's surrounded by a lot of love. A lot of friends and family and community, and we're keeping him busy and keeping his spirits up, but it's going to be a long road to recovery.
And this is something that the family, the extended family, all the friends, you've all got to kind of pitch in and help out as far as getting him back on track.
Absolutely. You know, Zaire, he's dealing with a lot. He's dealing with survivor's guilt, right? He doesn't understand why he survived and 10 others didn't. And, you know, as a mother, how do I, you know, tell my kid that he's supposed to be here and he's supposed to want to live, but I also don't know, right? I don't know how he's, you know, truly feeling. We talk about it, you know, I go to therapy with them and things like that, but yeah, it's scary. It's scary to know exactly how he's feeling inside, right? Just hearing him talk about it, you know, every time he talks about it, it brings tears to my eyes.
How often does he talk about it?
Every week we go to therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, which has been great for him. You know, he's opening up. When we first started, probably the first 9 months of therapy, he really didn't talk about it that much. But now he's starting to open up and talk about it a lot more, in more detail and stuff like that. So, yeah,
Kind of, can you kind of contrast, and not to belabor this too much, but can you, for the folks who are watching and listening, kind of contrast what was life like before for you, and then this awful tragedy happens, and how it's changed everything?
Well, you know, life for me was busy. I work for New York State Senator Tim Kennedy. I'm his director of diversity and inclusion, you know, so my job, and what I get paid to do is to talk about racism, right? And to talk about diversity and the need for, you know, more diversity in our community and in society, period. And, you know, that those issues knocked on my door, you know. And so for me, it was very important that I use my professional experience to help my community after 5/14, right? And to speak out about racism and about gun violence and things like that, and making sure that we're keeping the eye not only just on Buffalo and domestic terrorism, right? And white supremacy and things like that, but to make sure that the country is paying attention to what's going on in Buffalo, on the ground, on the east side of Buffalo, in the community, the issues that people are dealing with, right? This massacre transformed our community in one day. It closed down a grocery store that is vital to that neighborhood, my neighborhood. I live just blocks from Tops, right? And so, you know, we're having a larger conversation about why is there only one grocery store in that neighborhood? Why was that, you know, so traumatic to our community when it shouldn't be, right? there should be many grocery stores. There should be access to many resources in our community. And now, I'm making it my mission. I feel like for me, it is a way to pay it forward, using myself, right, to jump into these conversations and making sure that we are taking care of our community and we're bringing in the resources that we absolutely need.
Okay. You just brought up a very important point, and Mark, I'll ask you about this. I don't know how much of a news consumer you were before the tragedy on May 14th, but having the entire world focused in on all these issues in Buffalo, tell us your thoughts on Buffalo becoming the center of attention for the entire world.
Has its goods, has its bads. The goods more spotlighted is being put into marginalized communities and stuff that needs to be done so these communities can eventually get the wealth that other communities here have. But on the negative side, in times of tragedy, a lot of people like to come in and make money from it. Take photo ops, be seen where the tragedy happened, take pictures in their memorials. A lot of startup organizations to try to get some grant money or money meant for the East Side. So, like I said, you see its goods and evils. I just try to keep a focused mind so I'm already a very angry and hostile person. So I just try to keep my eyes focused on stuff that needs to be done. So once I see the negatives, it doesn't make me angrier.
Are you offended by all of that?
Absolutely. If anybody's had the pleasure of seeing me on any other interviews, I love calling people out. I love verbally pressing people, as I say, but eventually just get tired of doing the same thing. You just get burnt out of constantly having to call people out or press people, and people will be people. So I just try to focus on the outcomes and situations I can control to do what's best for myself and the community.
Okay. Thanks, Mark and Zanetta. The insight is just from both of you has just been incredible. So when we return, we'll talk more about what has changed in the year since this happened. We'll be right back.
No matter the occasion, Premier Gourmet is here for you. Featuring Buffalo's best craft beer selection, grocery store items, coffee, and gifts. Find locally made Buffalo products and everything you need for your home bar. Visit premiergourmet.com.
Experience Buffalo and Erie County's unique stories with the new Buffalo History Museum podcast. Connect with Western New York's history as you listen to detailed narratives about heritage, architecture, business, innovation, and significant events and people throughout time. The podcast takes inspiration from the museum's collection and beyond, from experts on staff and featured guests. From the 1918 influenza to F. Scott Fitzgerald, experience the stories that make up our region. The Buffalo History Museum podcast. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
No matter the occasion, the Premier Group is here for you. Take advantage of our easy online ordering and curbside pickup. Or shop the finest selection of unique wines, spirits, and gifts at any of our 3 independently owned Western New York locations.
Your life has taught you a lot. Now your experience can help change a child's life. Read to Succeed and AARP Experience Corps are looking for local volunteers, 50 and older, to help children in Buffalo City schools learn to read. You'll receive training to help you be a great tutor. You have what it takes to change a young person's life. The experience may even change your own. Volunteer by going to readtosucceedbuffalo.org.
Welcome back to Broadcasting Buffalo. I'm Al Waters. Tops on Jefferson Avenue has reopened in a neighborhood that's been described as a food desert. Kelly Ackerman takes a look at what has happened and what has changed since the shooting.
On May 14th, 2022, a man drove for hours to our community to shoot people just because of the color of their skin. We take a look at what has changed since that day.
Our dad, the man who created us, was killed by a little boy who was obviously raised by hateful people.
Victims' family members made emotional speeches about what was stolen from them last year when Peyton Gendron walked into a Tops supermarket and killed 10 people. They faced him as he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole in February.
He was blindsided by a hateful death at the hands of a selfish boy who was obviously not educated on the history of African Americans.
Ursuline Bankhead is a psychologist who specializes in racial trauma. She says in African American and Indigenous communities, the trauma happens across generations, starting in childhood.
It is prolonged stress. And within that prolonged stress, you have physical health issues that happen.
Bankhead says even 1 year after the shooting, the community is still feeling weary and on edge.
As the anniversary of May 14th approaches, something that we can anticipate is people feeling more anxiety, feeling some depression, feeling concerned that another traumatic event will happen.
Pastor James Giles is the leader of the Buffalo Peacemakers. His organization was very involved in the weeks following the shooting. We asked what has changed in the years since then. He says not enough when it comes to gun legislation.
No matter how many people, no matter how many children, no matter how many schools get assaulted, no matter how many malls, public malls or institutions get assaulted by these weapons, they still refuse to move on that. So that's the sad part of all of this.
The neighborhood where this happened has been called a food desert because of a lack of other food sources. While that hasn't changed, Giles feels that there are some positives that came out of the shooting. Community organizations, government officials, and charitable organizations are all trying to figure out ways to best meet the needs of this area.
So you had a lot of moving parts around this incident that actually continues even until today. Still processing how to best heal this community because of what it is that they experience.
Gendron will face federal charges in July. For Broadcasting Buffalo, I'm Kelly Ackerman.
Thank you, Kelly. I'm now joined by Michael T.A. Smith. He's the Save Our Streets Task Force Coordinator for the City of Buffalo. Now, Michael, from your perspective, tell us about the Operation Clean Sweep, and are our streets any safer now than they were back on May 14th?
Well, the Operation Clean Sweep is a coalition of city departments, community organizations, and volunteers. And essentially what we do is we descend into a community to improve quality of life. So that includes everything from service dissemination to taking care of the vacant lots and to, basically provide those services and explain programs that can assist residents with everything from housing concerns, violations. Now, when it comes to safety as a concern, I do believe some of our programs, especially through the Buffalo Police Department, have addressed those needs, but we kind of wanted to roll back from a more punitive aspect to the Clean Sweep program to a more equity and restorative driven process.
Does this mean enlisting folks from the neighborhood to kind of pitch in?
Yes, sir. So we have strong relations with the Board of Black Clubs and the Black Clubs throughout the city and kind of utilize them to bring volunteers out. We also have taken more of a perspective of listening to concerns of the community. So it's not the city coming in and giving what we feel the community needs. It's more the community telling us what is needed and then us trying to facilitate delivering those services.
Tell us about the process in coming up with the idea of this task force.
Well, it actually began in the early 2000s under Mayor Maciello. After Mayor Brown took office, he kind of, it's been continuing to grow into a restorative, equitable engagement perspective. And since I took over in 21 as the task force coordinator, I wanted to make sure that we had a stronger focus on health and wellness and of course, delivering those services into the community. But it really comes from the changes that happened throughout the season really come from, my experience as working as an AmeriCorps Vista for the city of Buffalo, really being able to see firsthand as the community engagement Vista, and kind of driving my desire to, want to work with the community members. I might have to take that back.
So your background, Vista,
Yeah.
that had to have given you all the background you really needed to be the coordinator for the task force.
Yes, sir. So it was actually a phenomenal experience. I was an AmeriCorps member from September of 2019 to September of 2020. And, that was a a very big year nationally, as you know, it was when the COVID epidemic really took off. It was also, unfortunately, when George Floyd was murdered. So, working in that position during that time, I really saw, how great the needs are and how great mental and physical health can decline in a pandemic, and mental health can be affected by some of the more aggressive cultural standards that this nation has with regard to race-based violence and racial issues in the police. So, being in that position, I was able to really find out that this is my passion, serving the community. And since, I was under the leadership of Mayor Brown and Director Oswaldo Mestre, I was given this position, and since I've been just doing whatever I can to help.
And so far, it looks like you're doing a pretty good job.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks a lot. So we'll be right back.
This is a college that inspires. Here you'll be engaged, strive for excellence, and prepare for a career. Visit our amazing Elmwood Village campus and apply today. You'll achieve your edge here. This place is Buffalo State College.
Hello, Buffalo. I'm Ed Asner. You may remember me as television's no-nonsense news director Lou Grant. And if you think about it, journalists provide us with our first draft of history. Right here in Buffalo, more than 50 years of TV news coverage is being brought back to life. Local stations are working with the Buffalo Broadcasters Association to bring back the stories that helped define the Niagara frontier.
The Pheasant Lane neighborhood, where drifts reach to the rooftops.
It's called the Archive Project, and I support it with all my heart. So should you.
On behalf of the Buffalo Broadcasters Association and everyone at Buffalo State University and Canisius College, thank you again for joining us for this episode of Broadcasting Buffalo. If you'd like more information about how to support families of the top shooting victims, visit our website, broadcastingbuffalo.com. Thank you again for joining us, and have a good night.